This is a podcast on green business. It's part of our decarbonisation net zero program. This episode is sustainable sips and green bites. Today we're looking at the tackling food waste in the food and beverage industry. My name is Dr. Jeff Parks. I'm an associate professor at Aston Business School, and I'm joined today by my guests are representing really two organisations. I'm joined by Bruce Nagra and Paramjit from Crazy Gin, and also Oliver Lloyd, who's the MD of Modus Food Waste and Recycling. And before I begin, welcome to my guests. Before I begin, I'm just going to ask each of them to perhaps introduce yourselves. So perhaps Paramjit, I could begin with you.
Hi, Paramjit and Bruce, we're the co-founders of Crazy Gin. Started on a drunken Friday night. We're a gin brand that distills our British upbringing and Indian heritage together. We launched in 2016. We then in 2017 moved to Wolverhampton, where our distillery is. We're very proud to distill everything in-house, and we've got two very innovative gins.
Fantastic. Okay, and Bruce, I think you've got it's a two-man team, isn't it? I think you two guys
Yes.
are the directors of the business. That's right, isn't it?
And distillers and everything else.
And distillers, yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you for that, Paramjit. Okay, and Oliver, over to you.
Hi there, Bruce, Panjit and Jeff. Yeah, so I have been in waste management for over a decade. I've worked in a variety of different industries within waste management. I've worked within the public sector, private sector. I've been involved in e-waste, which is electronical. I've even helped a national charity with one of their outlets, sourcing some items they could reuse for resale. Predominantly, I've been working in food waste. Our company was established about 8 years ago. One of the highlights for myself was being invited to the Commonwealth Games hosted in Birmingham,
Fantastic.
where I was part of a food waste summit, which was led to address the food supply chain within the Commonwealth. I was part of a closed group discussion with some of the delegates from different cities and countries within the Commonwealth, and of course I was there to discuss food waste management. I had the privilege of discussing large quantities of food waste with some countries that had real environmental issues, with some real tangible solutions which could benefit them and see food waste as a resource. And this is kind of my goal within the West Midlands, is to turn food waste into a resource which can help our environment and communities.
Fantastic. Thank you, Oliver. I mean, clearly, food waste is a real key issue for businesses, for organisations, for government, and it's one of the central topics within our decarbonisation programme. So what I'd like to do is perhaps kick off, and this is a discussion between the four of us. But I've got one or two topics here that I'd like to just talk to you about. The first one is about, I guess, really, it's about understanding what we mean by food waste. What are some of the prevalent misconceptions around food waste, particularly looking at the food and beverage industry, and also how significant is this as an issue, and how do you, when you dig around and look at what are the causes of food waste, what are those causes? And perhaps I'll begin with Bruce and Paramjit. In your business, what do people misunderstand about food waste, and what are the key issues, and how do you identify the primary causes?
I think for ourselves, coming into the industry, I think if you look from an outsider, you start thinking there's a lot that gets done. Because I think from a marketing perspective, everyone talks about being reducing the waste, being more efficient, energy efficient, and all these things. But when you kind of delve into it a little, it's not always the case. And I think it's about what's actually being done. For example, a lot of people say to us, why don't we use waste food products to turn them into products or drinks? The issue you then get around that is you can do that, but then you get inconsistencies. You then have to ask yourself the amount of effort that you're putting in and the energy that's being used. Is it actually extracting the right amount of flavor? Is it worth it? Or was it just better to start with the actual products fresh from the beginning? So I think it's also about information sharing. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are scared to share information, as that may be a way that they'll fall behind and everybody will play catch up. And I feel like that's something that just needs to be kind of, people need to be a bit more brave and share knowledge, because there's so much knowledge out there. I mean, we don't have to go far now. You can go on, you can use AI to help look at research papers. The world's a small place with the internet, so we can kind of look, and again, cross industry, sorry. So instead of just being kind of almost tunnel vision just within food and drink. Well, what's food and drink? Are you talking about restaurants? Well, restaurants could look at manufacturing businesses. How are the larger businesses doing things? How can you leverage products that they make to reduce you making everything in-house? It's a great story. It's very romantic. And I think if you're going for a high-end cocktail bar or a high-end restaurant, you kind of almost want them to put in the effort to do things. But on a bigger scale, it's
Yeah, but in a kind of beverage business, I mean, what are the primary causes of food waste? I mean, is it packaging? Is it energy? You know, where does is it raw materials? You know what I mean? What are the major primary causes of food waste?
I think it's a combination of things, because there's so many little parts of it. One is, I think a lot of people think about, if you want to reduce food waste, look at reusing food that's already been used once. But we also can look at the raw ingredients that we're using, from the sustainability of them, looking at the supply chain there. Then it goes all the way down to when you're going out for a meal and you're having a drink. A garnish can add aroma, and 90% of what you taste is through the nose. But how much garnish do you really need, and what's happening with it? Is a lot of it going in the bin? So there's lots of, I think, across the chain, there's something at every single step.
Okay, so there's not one big win here, is there?
I think it just
it's kind of, it's a lot of smaller items.
And just quickly touching upon, when it comes to like production like ourselves, it's about optimizing. So for example, when the people that were making our product first, when we first launched, we had no background in this, but it was a case of they were using over 22 kilos of ghee per 200 bottles. They were using a mash process. So that's where you get all the ingredients and distill in one go. And it was very costly. It was a lot of ingredients that we used. Once we started to delve into ourselves and learn everything ourselves, we went from 22 kilos of ghee down to 2 kilos of ghee, which is a significant saving. Instead of distilling a mash where you're now up against time to distill, because we have yogurt and other perishables, it was a case of we now brought that down by at least to a third of what was being used. And you're thinking, immediately, first, that's helped us on the cost side, but secondly, huge saving in food waste. So I think it's just about people being smarter on optimizing.
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, Oliver, I mean, I think you know, from Pramod and Bruce there, I mean, I think it's about understanding the processes and really trying to identify the different elements of food waste in the overall supply and production chain. What would you say from your perspective, from your experience, in terms of what are the primary causes and some of the misconceptions around food waste?
Okay, so beginning with the misconceptions, it's important really to put some background in this from a waste management perspective. Food waste has traditionally always gone into the landfill waste stream. So this has kind of made food waste a misconception in the fact that it's unnecessary to need to separate it. So as traditionally food waste has gone into landfill, it's been overlooked. And this has caused many people to believe, because it's always gone to landfill, therefore it's unnecessary to have to separate it and send it somewhere else. But there's so much environmental harm caused to go into landfill that it's a misconception from that point of view, even just thinking about putting food waste into practice. And then looking at some of the common causes of food waste, looking at it from farm to fork, a lot of these causes are consistent, but they have varieties of different stages. So, for example, from a farming point of view, overproducing can be a primary cause of food waste. if they don't have the contractors to sell the produce to. We know that workers on farms are short, therefore food is going to wastage because lack of labour. And then across the chain over to warehousing and food businesses that sell food, it can be over ordering, stock management can be a problem, not controlling perishables properly where they're going bad very quickly. But some of the other reasons we see is in a more personalised setting is not using things within the use by date. So for example, if we go to, say we want to cook a curry on Friday and we go to our fridge on a Thursday and we've got ingredients there which is going to go out of date by Friday, which we will not need for the curry. What do we do with that waste? What do we do with that food before it becomes waste? Do we have a family member, or, you know, on a larger scale, is there a different business we can offset this to? And it's about collaboration. And as Bruce said, sharing knowledge, sharing ideas. Collaboration is key, but the primary causes are usually behavior led or not understanding and not foreseen events, which is something is very difficult to control. But having a food waste plan is one of the first preventive measures.
I mean, I guess the pricing mechanism of food production doesn't help there, Oliver, does it? Because I guess the more we produce, the price falls, and therefore, we're not taking account of the cost of the waste, are we? I mean, there's not in the pricing mechanism of goods.
Yeah, so landfill is very expensive. Taking food to landfill is a problem. But it's again the misconception of putting food waste into a separation system is usually overlooked because it's not being heard of for so many decades. It's now deemed as, oh, we've always done this habitually and put it in the general waste landfill bin. So therefore, why do we need to integrate this system into our organisation? That's a big misconception, but thankfully due to you know, programs like the net decarb program, it's becoming more aware now through education, which is good.
Paramjit, you're gonna make a point there.
I was just thinking about, we've got food waste and then we've got a rise in food banks because of the cost of living, and there's a massive disconnect. And I think people and you see it on social media around the world, where people sometimes have these little fridges or they have these tables in their little community neighborhood. They've got perishable things are going to go out of date, they'll put it there for other people to use. And I think it's about a much learning from around the world and then just looking at the pros, the cons, and from a much higher, from maybe a government, from a point of view where this will start filtering down. And I think as communities, we can do a lot. The government need to put some implications in place as well. And then we can meet in the middle, because where we've got so much surplus and going into, we came to the seminar that you ran, and it was shocking. They were just saying how many people are hungry. And I think there's a massive piece of work that can be done there.
There's a disconnect, isn't there?
I've got an interesting fact as well. So it's always good to draw on some data where we can. So it's believed there's 10 million tons of food waste in the UK produced every single year, which is still edible. And there's 7 million people that are experiencing food insecurity in the UK. So those figures there just prove the disconnect and mismanagement of food to a real socio-economic issue, which would need to be addressed, really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, clearly it's a crucial part, as you said, Oliver, of the decarbonisation programme. I mean, just if I can take us on to sustainable practices. I mean, you guys are, you know, I mean certainly, you know, Bruce and Paramjit, you are, you know, a beverage producer. I mean, in terms of how do you operationalize sustainable practices in that kind of context? How do you actually do it? How do you recognize what you can do to minimize waste, and how do you operationalize it in the business? How do you do that?
I think from over the years, especially with the gin production, we've always tried to optimize as far as we can. Because obviously you got certain processes. When our first lassi gin was made, there's only so much that we could do before you start to affect flavor. And with a product that's already in the market, we can't have that happen. But then any products that we made since, so for example, our chai gin, it was a case of how do we optimize that? Okay, where are the So when we look at ingredients and extraction, it's like, okay, how can we do it so we're not overdoing things? So it's like, where's the optimal point? Okay, now we got the optimal ratios that we've got. Okay, how do we optimize our equipment? So we're fortunate when we bought our equipment. So we use rotary evaporator, which is lab equipment that helps you distill under vacuum, which essentially means you can boil at low temperatures. So we can boil things like yogurt or fresh herbs, but it retains flavor. And the beauty about that equipment is it's all under vacuum and it's all fairly energy efficient. So it's about, okay, let's make sure that we optimize how, every time we distill, we'd make records and we find out, okay, what is the absolute optimum? That doesn't mean the fastest, and it doesn't mean take forever to do it. It's
No,
about
but you're
where's that
storing the
balance?
data on. You understand the data.
Save
Yeah,
that
okay.
data, and then it's about, okay, that's how we've optimized the energy side. From the waste point, it is, let's say when we're doing cocktails, we're making our subscription, our cocktails on the go. It's about, okay, do we need to use fresh perishables? Are there extracts that we can use where they're still natural? You still got things like citric acids, malic acids, where you can create that sharpness, the sourness, instead of using fresh produce. It's still the same compounds that you're getting, but it also means you now have a shelf life. It also means on a huge industrial scale, manufacturers are out there extracting these flavors, optimizing them. So as part of their businesses, they have to be optimized. As part of their businesses, they do reduce the waste. So why try to make the product that we can get off the shelf ourselves? Because it will be an inferior quality. It won't have a shelf life. So it's about identifying those parts.
It's funny because people would sometimes say to us, you use yogurt, you use ghee, why don't you make it at home? And we were like, the energy cost, the raw labor, it doesn't make financial sense. And the consistency and flavor. And also it's about asking questions. So when we first started the business, someone else used to distill for us. And it just shows you how naive we were as well. We did not question the process. We wanted this product, they made it for us. And it's only when we took the recipe off them, they were using one specific type of yogurt that you could only buy in one market in London. And that was not sustainable. That wasn't going to make sense. So everything got questioned. And because unlike, Oliver, you were talking about the perishables and food and the fridges, with our ingredients, they're not going to go off. And once you've made an alcohol, it's not going to say within 7 days it's going to go off. So when we are looking at any research development or any cocktails or anything, we're very much mindful, whatever we're using, what's going to be the shelf life of it, and what are we going to do with it if it doesn't sell? So that's always at the forefront of any new products that we're thinking of.
And I think just to quickly touch on outside of just the ingredients, I think packaging is a big thing. So when we just touch outside of the food waste element, when you're looking at packaging, I think there has been a shift over the last few years where we're now finding brands like Flexi Hex who make an amazing hexagonal kind of cushion packaging, which is all 100% recyclable. It's all card. And it also creates a nice kind of end presentation for a customer. Whereas when it comes to the tray, but there is also a price that comes in fairly expensive for that. But it means we're not having to create an extra sleeve. We're not having to do extra things. We're not having to use card where it's treated with inks or foiling or something that can't be recycled. And then the other side of it is when we're working with trade, we're using packaging from that's 90% recyclable plastic.
Okay.
We still have to account for couriers.
Okay. I mean, look, I think Oliver, I mean, I think from Pramjit and Bruce, I mean, I think it's understanding your components, understanding the supply chain, things like packaging also come into that. What would you say from the operational model of food waste recycling? How would you add to that kind of? How could you elaborate on sustainable practices in your area of activity?
Yeah, so from an industrial commercial food operation, it's about having the management plan in place and looking at what kind of things you're producing from a food producer. If you are a wholesaler, it's about storing products, and there are times accidental things happen, such as labeling can be incorrect, which then deems the product unusable. So it's about having the food waste management plan in place where things can be collected swiftly from a company to come and remove the food waste. From our point of view, when we are auditing food at an organisation, we're always on the key to mitigate food waste. I know it sounds maybe contradictory as a food waste company looking to remove food waste from our customers' operational point of view, but we want to educate and improve the food system. We're not just about collecting food waste and turning it into energy, which is a big thing that we do. We look to educate the customer, educate the organisation that we work within, look for available food that can be redistributed before it has had the opportunity to actually turn into waste. There's so many organisations which we work with and collaborate with in the West Midlands that can take food off our hands and redistribute it to people who need it. And that's one of the big sustainable factors that we try and implement across any organisation it is that we work with. There's always going to be opportunities to reduce and distribute, and I think that is a big thing that we work towards in our company.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that, and that kind of takes me on to our next topic, I think, because obviously, it's headlines in news, and government policy is trying to tackle this agenda towards moving towards net zero and the challenges of moving towards net zero. I mean, what would you say, again, turning to Paramjit and Bruce, what would you say, I mean, in terms of managing that process, have you got any real success stories on, or innovative solutions? I mean, you've talked about one or two, your key production, one or two things that you've talked about, but any key success stories that have really helped you to reduce food waste, even in part of the decarb program? Have you got anything which you think you could point to and say that's really saved us money, it's saved the planet waste? I mean, anything that you can point to there?
I think for me, immediately always comes back down to, because I still find it quite hard to wrap my head around how much ghee we've reduced and how much the
I mean, that is
ingredients.
amazing, isn't it? It's like 80% reduction. I mean, that's incredible.
It made it actually viable as a product. I mean, we started this more as a passion project, and then it was like, well, is this actually sustainable? When you realize what can be achieved just through reformulating or just optimizing your process.
I think it's also very good to ask questions. And I think when we're in a new industry or a new environment or a new topic comes along, I think we're all very good at questioning it because we're trying to wrap our head around it. But once we've been in our industry for a while, it's easy to get complacent and say, but that's just the way it is and that's how it's always done. And for us, it's always questioning. It doesn't matter how it's always been done. Is it the best way to do it? And I think that's the only way we're going to keep evolving and keep growing. So even with our equipment, you've done the lagging. We've looked at positioning within our distillery. There's a water bath. Where do we need to put it? Is it near any air vents? Is that going to cool the water bath? So it's just all of those mechanics. But I think the key thing is always question. And even when you're working with other people, ask as many questions, because that's when you're going to know if someone's credible, if they know what they're talking about, or whether there's a cowboy or a cowgirl. They just want to make a quick buck.
I guess it's just looking at all the little bits, and I think people can start feeling, well, if I just move the machine from there to there, oh wow, it's only going to save this much energy. But when you got lots of those little bits, including like if I could just reduce 5% of the ingredients that I'm putting in there, when you compound all of this, it makes a big, significant difference just to a business on its own. But if you imagined a collective of businesses across the industry doing that, how much of a knock-on effect that can have. So I think even if it's a small amount, I guess for most businesses, it's about contextualizing in how much money you're saving. Because I think, unfortunately, no matter how much you talk about better for the planet, I think I'm sure Oliver probably finds it as well, when you're speaking to businesses, a lot of the time they just want to go through the motions of you talking and then turn to each other and say, well, I'm not spending money on someone coming in telling me this because I could just carry on and save money. But because they don't pay attention to what the long-term impact it can have as a positive, not just for the business, the planet.
Yeah, I mean, Oliver, have you got any, because you work with a lot of businesses, Oliver, I mean, have you got any real success stories, innovative solutions that you've come across and you thought, gosh, that was a great idea in terms of decarbonisation, reducing waste?
Yeah, one of them I can recall is working with an organisation in the West Midlands, and they had a whole array of sandwiches that they were selling, and they fell out of date periodically over a weekend. And if they weren't sold by Friday, come Monday, they'd have to go into the bin, which would, of course, at this current time, they didn't have any food waste processing in place, so it was going to landfill, which then would cause methane and other issues such as that. So an easy solution which we implemented was to redistribute the sandwiches on a Friday to neighbouring communities and organisations that could then put them into people's houses that really needed the food. So for me, that was one simple solution that was just connecting two dots together in a locality.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
benefited the socio-economic factor, and it also benefited the environment as well. And at that stage, it actually prevented food waste from occurring.
And do you liaise, Oliver, do you liaise with other regions in the UK to kind of network, to kind of share ideas amongst other organisations? Is that something that you get up to?
So unfortunately, no, we don't. And I think a large reason is because we work towards the smart city kind of techniques where food waste is produced locally, it's collected locally, and then
Yeah, okay.
it's sent to a local anaerobic digestion, which then produces energy, which is then used in the local national grid.
Yeah, so it's kind of a...
And then it produces a byproduct, which is an organic fertilizer, which goes to farming locally again, produces the food, goes back into the food system in the local area. And it's all, I think it's just an amazing ecosystem of collaboration. And
but it is quite localized, as you say. You can kind of identify the benefits, can't you, from a local and a regional perspective.
yeah,
I think is something that you can absolutely identify. I mean, kind of that takes me on to my last topic, really, which is about the really impact and benefits. You know, I work at Aston, I work in the marketing group, and we're always looking for ways that, you know, perhaps taking a sustainability position in a marketplace can improve our competitive advantage. You know, if you kind of think about what the potential economic benefits are, environmental benefits, we've touched on, I think. But how do you think in your organizations, or maybe you've got some examples of how you can really develop the benefits of sustainability within your business? How do you think you can not necessarily monetize it, but just improve the way that you organize and the way perhaps your customer sees you? What guys, Bruce and Pramjit, what would you say?
I'm just thinking about sustainability bigger. There's one thing that I like. When we first started 8 years ago, you'd go for tastings and everyone used to have these little tasting cups and they were plastic.
Yeah,
And you would, I'm sure you must go through millions, because if you think about each brand going to so many venues, and now you're seeing more and more a reduction, or they're definitely recyclable, or people are moving on to paper. The other thing, it's not food, but it's just about the sustainability thing. There's something called POS. So if you get a listing somewhere, if someone buys something from you, it's like a little free gift. And sometimes we look at them that are given around and we're just like, how many people are going to utilize these? And how many of these, it could be a bottle opener, it could be a coaster, and how many are just going to go into landfill because it's tap and people don't want it? So it's about being mindful about how can you have a long lasting impact with your customer by giving them something that they're going to be able to use and something that's just not going to go into landfill. Because it's not just a knock-on effect of it going into landfill, it's going all the way back, and you trace it to someone's producing it, the raw materials, the whole lot, the shipping. And if they're coming from overseas because it's cheaper to buy it from overseas, there's even more carbon emissions. So it's about looking at the whole totality of everything.
And I think, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go on, Bruce, go on.
As I say, from a brand perspective, and I think it's about being honest. So it's not about promising things you can't do. So we sometimes come across people saying, oh, we can guarantee zero carbon delivery. Well, I'm not sure how you can guarantee that across the UK. It's about, oh, we're fully sustainable, or we're this, or we're that. All our products have, or packaging is 100% biodegradable. It's like, is it really? It's about what are the things that you can actually put your kind of flag in and say, no, that's what we stand for. So it's about just being clear and not kind of using the term greenwashing. just to kind of
no.
get ahead as a competitive advantage, because the public are switched on. People
They're
can
savvy, aren't they?
Yeah, so it's about don't lie, like just be as authentic as you can, and there are some process that we just can't afford to change.
Yeah.
Wish we could, but we can't. So we're not going to say we will eliminate this in X amount of time when we can't guarantee that. So I think it's just about being authentic and just being clear. Transparency, sorry, that's the word.
That's it. I mean, it is a process, isn't it? It's moving towards net zero. I mean, it's initiatives that are going to assist you getting there, I guess, is the key thing. What would you say, Oliver, in terms of the economic impacts? What would you say?
So the economic impacts, well, it's effectively it's going to cost us more money in the long run if we're constantly using virgin raw materials. However, if we can keep materials in reuse and repurpose for longer, then there's going to be less demand for these raw materials, which then will affect economic prices when manufacturing and producing. I think every industry will have their own ability to reduce what they're doing and be more carbon conscious and strive towards net zero. If we could imagine maybe never throwing anything away again and keeping things in use as long as possible, reusing items for another person's production. This is the kind of goal we want to get into. This is the circular model. And it might not be something we see in our lifetime, but we can all do our best to implement and making sure we're putting the foundations for the futures of the next generations, really, so they have a good platform to work off that we've done our very best. It's not an easy thing to achieve, but we've all got our own bits we can do. And I think collaboration is absolutely vital in these operations, sharing knowledge, producing particular types of materials. Even in food and beverage industries, I've heard of a beverage company, for example, using surplus bread to produce their beverages. Again, Bruce, he said that it might not work with some flavors, but where it can, let's do it. You know, there's even eggshells into tiles, which is crossing in another industry from food into manufacturing. You know, there's a variety of different things and practices out there which just need to be more prevalent within our marketplace, I think, and that should help the economy and prices in the long run.
Brilliant. Thanks, Oliver. I mean, look, we're coming to the end of this podcast now. I mean, is there anything that we've covered a number of issues around understanding food waste, sustainable practices, some of the challenges towards moving to net zero, and some of the economic benefits? Is there anything that you guys are, as I said, deeply involved in this issue? I mean, is there anything that you want to add that perhaps we've not talked about? Bruce, Pramjit, anything you'd like to add on this topic before we finish?
I think what will be quite good going forward is more case studies being shown to businesses.
Okay, so sharing best practice, kind of, yeah.
But kind of almost tailored to. So, for example, if there's a national distillery that does a project that saves them, it's not going to be applicable to us. So it'd be like, okay, is there something across? Can't do it for every category, but at different ranges in each industry.
Okay,
so at least when. And I guess the main thing is a lot of the first things that will get people's eyes and ears to pay attention is money. If you can prove to someone by doing these processes, yes, there'll be an outlay potentially, or there's going to have to be a change of mindset, but there's a potential saving of X amount over this because here's an example of so this other business has done that. It might just kind of start opening the door a little.
I think also education is key. We've got a 5-year-old, so already the conversations we're having with him are very different to the conversations my parents had with me growing up. So there's something about longevity as well. There's something that we need to do in the here and now, but then there's other seeds that we're planting with that younger generation as they're growing up about what their shopping habits are, how they see things, buying stuff in surplus, whether it's clothing. There's so much, the whole lot. It's just about, it's that mindfulness.
Okay, thanks, Bruce and Pramjit. Oliver, anything you want to add just as a final?
Yeah, I think our behaviour and mindset is a good place to begin with, and we just have to hate waste in all its forms, really, and just be really passionate about changing things and helping others and just making use of our resources in the planet as long as we can. And
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Oliver. So look, it just leads me to say, Bruce Pramjit from Crazy Gin, nice to see you guys again. Thank you for your contribution today. And Oliver from Food Waste Recycling. Really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.